And we are so excited to have people with us this afternoon.
Welcome, welcome.
Once we let everybody in, Amanda, I'll let you take it away and then I'll go.
Sounds good. Hey everyone, just gonna give everyone a second to get in the room. Gonna give about one more minute and we will jump right in. Glad you're here, everyone. All right, looks like our numbers have slowed down, so I'm gonna jump in. It's 12:01. And just welcome everyone to this space. Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Noyes. I am the Arts Learning and Accessibility Director for the South Carolina Arts Commission. I'm a white female in my mid-30s. I've got brown hair and I'm wearing a green sweater today. And I am so glad that you've chosen to spend the mid-afternoon with us and join us for the second webinar of our Disability and Arts webinar series of this fiscal year. This year, we're going to be hosting quarterly webinars, so be on the lookout for upcoming dates in January of 2026 and March of 2026, kind of for our second half of this series. I'm share a little bit about the Arts Commission. So the mission of the South Carolina Arts Commission is to expand access to the arts and foster creativity for all South Carolinians. Over the past several years, SCAC has partnered with Able South Carolina to meet this mission. Through our partnership, we've provided accessibility technical assistance to artists and arts organizations, accessibility assessments and audits, resource sharing, and professional development in accessibility best practices like this webinar. We've also hosted office hours as well as a cohort-style learning environment for arts organizations. SCAC enables South Carolina's strategic partnership aims to increase access in the arts sector at a statewide level. So we are so thankful that you're here to join us for this learning opportunity today. Today's webinar is going to be an artist spotlight on Keith Wann, an acclaimed American Sign Language performing artist. And I'm going to hand things over to Dory Tempio from Able, South Carolina to further introduce Keith, and then we'll hand things over to him. Go ahead, Dory.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dory Tempio. I am the Senior Director of Community Education for Able South Carolina, and a visual description of me for anybody in the audience who might have a visual disability. I am a middle-aged white woman with dark reddish brown hair. I have blue eyes, and today I'm wearing blue dress pants with a light blue, royal blue, and white striped dress shirt. And I am super excited to be with you all today. We are a disability-led organization. We are at the forefront of ensuring programs, activities, and services in the community are accessible to all people. And as a result, we have this wonderful collaboration with the South Carolina Arts Commission to ensure that art services, programs, and activities are accessible to people with disabilities. And we host these webinars to help others make their programs, services, and activities accessible to the disability community. And so today we are going to be focusing on hearing disabilities and access to arts programs and services for the deaf and hard of hearing community. I am excited because we have a wonderful guest speaker today. But before we get started, I want to invite anyone, and I'm going to ask Annie if she can put it in the chat in case someone needs it visually. Is there anyone here that needs an American Sign Language interpreter or any other, what we call the legal word, reasonable accommodations or supports to participate in today's webinar? We want to make sure that you have what you need, that we're guiding you on how to pin the interpreter on your screen if you need it, and that we're providing any other accommodations or supports individuals may need. and then we're going to get started. We just want to make sure that everybody has the supports they need to comfortably participate. I don't see anything in the chat, so I am going to go ahead and get started and introduce our wonderful, amazing guest speaker today. Keith Wann is an acclaimed American Sign Language, or ASL, performing artist who has been captivating and amusing audiences with his controlled chaos and total pandemonium comedy explosions on stage. He often leaves us laughing and gasping for breath. Juan has quickly established a reputation for his wacky, off the wall stories that ring true, with codas everywhere, and are equally funny for other members of the deaf community. Keith was born to deaf parents in California, meaning that he is the child of deaf adults. Keith grew up living in both the hearing and deaf worlds and has been able to create unique perspectives on the way of both worlds. We love it because it has evolved into a one-man show, Watching Two Worlds Collide, which takes a humorous, almost shocking look at both worlds. Keith has been performing since 2002, starting with a sign language improv group called Iceworm, which I'm excited to learn more about. And then in 2004, his solo career quickly took off due to several parody music videos going viral. Throughout the years, Keith has continued to tour with his own solo show and producing an ASL comedy tour event with other comedians. Viral videos are still being uploaded to his various social media outlets, which comment and show his childhood, whether it was going to church and being with his family. And so I proudly introduce to y'all Keith Wann. Thank you for being with us today.
Gosh, thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Dory, for that awesome introduction. So I'm going to be transparent. This is a learning experience for me too right now, because growing up having deaf parents, both my parents are deaf, everything was, about making sure that they had access. And so today, this afternoon, as we started this introduction, both Dory and Amanda did visual descriptions on them. And I want to be transparent. I'm actually not used to that. So I want to do a visual description. I don't want to say middle age, because I told my kids I'm going to live to be 120. So I'm not 60 yet. I'm 56. A white male, 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, in a green room, wearing a blue shirt with some stripes on it. In the background, I have a piggy bank, a pig with a Christmas hat on. And I love being transparent. I'm at that point in my life where it's like, why even fake it anymore? Why even just say lies? Let's just all be transparent. And so another thing that this is interesting for me, when I was invited, when I was asked to do this, I said, absolutely, what an honor to be able to talk about my parents and the access that the deaf community has and needs to continue. But as Dory stated, my background, I sign. I'm more comfortable signing. English is my second language. So even when I got on this call about 10 minutes ago, I looked at the interpreter and said, oh, good, you're here. I'm just going to sign and you can voice. But bad on me, I didn't prepare them. I am more comfortable signing. So voicing this, using my voice, is going to be an interesting experience. So if I have any run-on sentences, incomplete sentences, please, all you English teachers out there, just take a break. Be very forgiving for me. And another interesting thing for me to do this presentation, and again, because I'm going to talk about my parents and my experience as a hearing child growing up in the deaf world. I am known as a sign language comedian, but for several years living in New York City, I went to the comedy clubs and I said, hey, I want to try to be a hearing comedian. So I came up with an 8-minute set, and I used to go and practice every week. And after a year, they would highlight us and showcase us. And so I was able to get up on stage at a late night in front of some alcohol enjoying people and do a couple jokes. And whenever I did something about my parents, like, hey, my last name is Wann. At least I think that's how you pronounce it, because growing up, my parents are deaf, and they said, "Oh," and no one would laugh. And I actually got comments saying, "How dare you, as a 6 foot tall, white, straight male, make fun of people with disabilities?" And I was like, because if I did that same joke in sign language, which I have, I've done that same joke in sign language for deaf audiences, deaf community, interpreters, ASL students. They laugh, they relate to it. They say, absolutely, we know what you're saying. We know what you're saying. So I say all that background to say, okay, this is going to be fun voicing this. And if I say anything, please know that I'm coming from a area, coming from a background that I'm just here to help offer maybe some solutions, just to help offer some insights. And so I am a hearing child of deaf adults. I didn't learn how to speak until third grade. My first language was sign language. At 8 months old, I babbled. The research has shown that hearing children of deaf parents do babble in sign language, and so I would sign a sign that looked similar to mom or water. And so it wasn't until third grade that the school said, "Hey, you're not pronouncing words right. You're not saying this right." So they put me in speech therapy. I did that for 2 years. And in my deaf show, I joke about it. That was the proudest moment for my mom, because she had speech therapy and now her son has speech therapy. But then I grew up in San Jose, California, a huge, we call it the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose community. And it was a big deaf community. I also want to let you know, it wasn't only that I had a deaf family, I grew up in a deaf community. And back in the 70s and 80s, before we had access, before we had Zoom video meetings, before we had anything, cultural communities would live together. And so in this apartment complex, 20 apartments were just all deaf families and hearing children. So I grew up very proud of who I was. I have met some other CODAs, children of deaf adults, that maybe grew up in farming communities and they were the only deaf community, only deaf family in the area. So they felt different. For me, my identity is strongly, I have a strong culture because having the deaf community around, going to deaf church, always being around deaf people growing up, that gave me the background to be proud to use sign language, to be proud to have deaf parents. But there was a lot of vicarious, I don't say trauma, vicarious. There was moments where I saw growing up my parents being discriminated against, saying, "Wait, something's different here. Something's different. Here's my mom and dad. I love them." And sometimes people ask me, "Were you ever embarrassed to have deaf parents, or what was it like to have deaf parents?" And I can't do a compare and contrast because I didn't have hearing parents. My experience was deaf parents, and all children, we love our parents. But I remember in the 70s, our experience of going to the movies might have been different than yours. Because I remember in 1977, I was 8 years old, and seeing Star Wars, I was so excited. But I would look over there, and my mom and dad were bored. They could not hear the John Williams music, right? That pounding orchestrated music that John Williams, I'm a big John Williams fan because he's in all my favorite movies, Indiana Jones, Star Wars. But that was something I could not share with my parents. I was like, oh, okay, they're just seeing the movie. And my dad made a comment like, oh, I noticed white stormtroopers bad, the people wearing black robes are good. So that it was just visual observations. And then in 1978, we went and saw Jaws. That movie, again, with the music would scare us hearing people. We knew the shark was coming. We knew something was about to happen. And there was a scene, I know I'm probably the oldest one here, so no one remembers this, but there was a scene where the divers are going down and almost the music is playing, and this white decapitated head, pops out, and the whole audience, we scream. My dad started laughing. he started just straight, he didn't have the music to scare him. So he's watching, he sees these people, all of a sudden a head just pops out. He's just like, thought it was the funniest thing. And so again, just made me go, okay, different experience. So we would go to movies that have captions, and that's how I became a huge Jackie Chan fan. I'm known about Jackie Chan, and Jackie Chan is a famous martial artist for some of us that don't know Jackie Chan. A very famous martial artist, very famous for his facial language, grammar, how he looks. It's very comedic kind of stuff. And in these Chinese karate movies, they had subtitles. And so we would always go to those movies because we didn't go to the other movies like seeing Grease. My parents did not want to go see Grease. They didn't care to see these two adults playing teenagers singing at each other. That was boring for them. And all those movies, The Godfather, just a lot of talking. How boring is that? Whereas we remember lines, we memorize those lines from, the movies like Godfather. So it was very visual growing up, a very visual experience doing that, going to the deaf church. In fourth grade, I decided to play the bass violin. And I loved it because, John Williams, and I'm going to do this. And I started playing. We practiced and practiced and practiced. And it was the night that my parents came to my show and they just sat there looking at me, smiling, while every other parent in the audience, and some of us parents, we might have children that are in band. And in the fourth grade, we're not we're not good yet, being transparent. And so for me, just standing there on stage and looking out and hearing parents like, okay. Whereas my mom and dad were just like, he's good. Look at him. He's good. I look back and that was a moment in my life where I just went like, wow, my parents are going to support me no matter what I do. If I decide to go into music or if I decide to do this. Side note, which is funny, every single CODA movie out there, the big CODA one that just came out a couple years ago, another one called Beyond Silence, all of the famous CODA movies out there are about the conflict of the CODA loving music that their parents can enjoy. So for me, it was interesting that I had this experience back in the 70s, but I decided to become an actor. In fifth grade, we had a talent show. We had some kind of silly comedy thing, and I joined that. And I remember when the stage opened up and I saw my parents, I had a realization like there's no interpreter here. How are they gonna know what I'm doing? How are they gonna know what I'm saying? How are they gonna know how the play is moving along, who the bad guys are, who the good guys are? And unfortunately, the Americans with Disabilities Act wasn't out yet back then. And so I, as this little coda on stage, would sign my lines. And I'm doing a visual thing right now where I'm kind of doing stuff with my hands right here. And I would sign all my lines. And when the other kids talk, I interpret for my parents like this. And you can see some of the hearing parents are like, what's wrong with that kid over there? Oh, he's got a nervous tick. It's okay. Let's support him. But to see my parents, and they were like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay. And then finally, in sixth grade, the school didn't really provide an interpreter. They found a volunteer from the church to get up there and sign. And it was cute. It was cute. Unfortunately, the interpreter, like right now, we have a phenomenal interpreter, Teague. She's like, sometimes she's even ahead of me. She knows what I'm going to say. She's doing a great job. But this interpreter might have been a half hour behind what was going on. And so when there was a part in the play when somebody said, hey, who passed gas? All the parents started laughing, but the interpreter wasn't there yet to that line. The play continued, and it was a sad part. It was like, oh, Aunt Dolly died. Everybody was sad. By then, the interpreter got to, hey, who farted? Sign farted. My dad's laughing. While everyone else was like, they thought he was laughing at the fact that Aunt Dolly died, right? And so it's those kind of experiences that are now in my show. But growing up and just going, access, it's all about access. How can we provide access? So, um, So I have that background. So then I go to high school, I get out, I graduate, I start working at Denny's, and I'm going to be all over my story here. Sometimes I'll jump back in the timeline, but I'm working at Denny's around 1990, and I thought this was my life. I started off as a overnight dishwasher. I was now the head morning cook, the guy who got to flip the eggs. My wife still loves me flipping those eggs. I flipped those eggs, and for Sunday morning, the busiest, had a deaf friend come in and say, because again, I still had my deaf friends. Those even now in my life, my friends are either deaf or interpreters. Everybody knows sign language. It's really rare for me to have a hearing, and I say that, and I say hearing because it is a cultural difference. Like when I was growing up, my mom said, "Oh, it's time for you to go to the hearing school," and I was like, "No, I don't want to." She's all, "Yeah, you have to. That's your culture. It's the HC people." Well, HC, what do you mean HC? Oh, it's the hearing can't people, the hearing can't sign, right? And so being at Denny's, being excited, this is my career, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. A friend came in and said, "Hey, the local college needs an interpreter. Would you interpret for me?" And I was like, "What's that mean?" Just the concept of an interpreter. What do you mean that they pay you for it? Because we have church volunteers, people at the church will volunteer. What do you need to I just need you to tell me what they're saying, in class. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do now. I tell you what he says, and you tell. Okay, so I'm at Denny's. I'm making $6.25 an hour. This is like top money. And he said, I know, but they're offering $25 an hour. I became an interpreter, guys, and I'm being transparent. I did it for the money because I was like, heck yeah, I'll tell you what they're saying. This is just sign language, whatever. I did not know it was a real profession, did not realize it. There was an organization called Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. It's been around since 1964, but in 1991, I still didn't hear about it. 92, 93, right when the ADA was signed, Justin Dart got to interpret for him. What a phenomenal person. So I became an interpreter, and it took me about a year or two to realize, hey, this is a real profession. Back then, you could become an interpreter and not even have graduated high school. There was no requirements. It was just, are you good? Can the deaf person understand you? Hey, deaf person, this person good? Absolutely. So I got into it, dropped out of college. I dropped out of college, 8 units left of my associates. Like I was at 52 credits and you needed 60 to get an associate's. But I was like, no way, this is the life. Became an interpreter, realized it was a profession, started going to workshops and learning from other people saying, this is what you need to do. We have code of ethics. You can't get involved. Don't give the deaf person a ride home. Don't drink during, and all this stuff. It's like, okay, this is serious. It's got into the world of interpreting. And through being an interpreter, I got to live in Alaska where I met Justin Dart. I got to live in Alaska where I was a staff interpreter for a nonprofit agency that would provide workshops and trainings for hearing businesses and communities on how to provide interpreters. Got to live over in Germany for the Department of Defense, an American Army base, because they had a 6-year-old deaf girl. One of the soldiers had a deaf child, and on the American bases, it's under American laws, they had to provide a sign language interpreter. So I got to live over there for 3 years, came back, um, lived in Florida, Pennsylvania, New York City, all over, just being an interpreter and just having a great experience. Along the way, I became a comedian. I became a person who would start sharing my stories, and that was Iceworm. Iceworm was these two deaf guys, and whose line is it anyway was on TV, and they wanted to do a whose sign is it, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm quick on my feet with ASL. Just give me an idea and I'll act out something because I had my parents and all the people in the deaf apartment, all the people in deaf church. I've seen so many different signing styles that I was very well versed in on how to look like this or how to look like that. So I joined the group and it was ha ha funny funny. We had a good time. We were performing the big venues like the Girl Scouts camping trip, which is like 30 girls. So these big venues like where it was at a bar and we had 3 performers and there was only 2 people in the audience, right? We outnumbered them. So but from that, the more we kept doing, ASL classes started to invite us out there. The more we kept doing, they would say, hey, tell us a story about your personal life. I was like, oh, okay. Well, my parents are deaf. And one time I didn't think my mom was deaf and I unplugged the vacuum cleaner just to see and ha ha ha. And people started laughing. I'm like, oh, well, here's another story. Here's another story. So within a year of joining Iceworm, the three of us actually developed our own solo shows. And so we all started going off and doing things. Crom Saunders was part of Iceworm, and now he's a very big deaf performer, workshop presenter, lived out of the Chicago area. But it all started from there. Started traveling around, doing my own show in sign language. And so I would have to provide a voice interpreter because I wanted you, the audience here, to show up and to have access. But my goal was to make sure people like my deaf parents and my deaf friends in the audience had instant access. So you guys would have to depend on the voice interpreter. And that was a very interesting experience because just like tonight, this afternoon, when I popped up and I said, hey, to the interpreter, hey, I need you to do this, 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 and that. And she came back as a professional saying, well, I didn't get any prep material. When I was doing my show, I didn't think I had to give prep material because I wasn't used to interpreters preparing, practicing, getting the information. So I would do my show, and whatever the local interpreter was, phenomenal, sometimes not so phenomenal. I would do exaggerations. Like my wife is Latina, and she does an exaggeration in the Spanish culture. Moms always throw sandals at each other, right? The chocolatas, they always throw and ha 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 ha. I know her mom didn't do that. I know, but that's a stereotype. And so there's stereotypes in the deaf community where my mom would chase around the house and her spanks, a deaf spank would look different than a hearing spank. A hearing spank, and I don't even think we spank our children anymore. So again, this is just a comedy bit that we did back in the 70s. But a hearing spank would be like, I told you, and they would talk and spank at the same time. Whereas a deaf spank would be, hey, get your attention. You'd have to look. I told you, hey, get your attention. So a spank would go on for like 30 minutes. Ha, 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 exaggeration. I had a voice interpreter voice it who was not of the background of comedy. And she voiced it like she was voicing a documentary. So there was hearing people in the audience like crying, like, oh, this kid, poor kid, Keith got beat up as a kid. And that made me realize, like, oh, wow, you're getting a totally different show. The deaf people are like, and I can't even imagine you guys being there and seeing deaf people celebrating me getting beat with a sandal, right? So that made me realize I got to bring my own interpreter. I got to prepare my own interpreter. I got to, hey, interpreter, this is what I'm going to do. Let me go ahead and do my show for you. So, this is where my punchline is. This is my goal. Sometimes you're going to be ahead of me. And I joked earlier about Teague, our interpreter, being ahead of me. But sometimes I need my voice interpreters to be ahead of me to know where I'm going to go with this bit. So when we land on the punchline, it's at the same time. So that's been an interesting experience working with the voice interpreters, which then that kind of led me down to working in Broadway at New York City. I got to work at Broadway, providing interpreting services, and that took a lot of preparation. So I know tonight we're talking. I don't know why I keep saying tonight. We're in the same time zone. I am just stuck on tonight. It's all good, right? Yeah. English. In ASL, I would have been saying daytime. See, English, I'm saying tonight. See, that's how messed up it is. But a lot of us here are in the services, programs and activities, and we want to provide access. And so I'd like to talk about that. Providing access, unfortunately, is not just getting everything ready, getting the John Williams soundtrack, getting the spotlights on the performer, getting all this stuff, getting all this. Oh yeah, we need an interpreter. Last minute, just throwing an interpreter in there because you might have the deaf person might have the experience that my hearing audience did and get a whole different impression of the show, right? So unfortunately, that interpreter is the speaker. So do you want them listening to a 3-watt AM radio static speaker, or do you want them having the same experience, the high phonic, stereophonic experience? And so for Broadway, and for a lot of theater companies, when we're hired, the interpreter, a team of 3, not just one person, because research out there has shown, fatigue after 20 minutes. And it's not physical, it's more mental fatigue. And like, I'm hearing this, how would I change it? Hearing this, because it's not a word for word language. It's not just as easy is putting them up there. Teague right now is doing a phenomenal job. I'm saying 2 or 3 sentences. She's going, okay, this is what it would look like in sign language. She's not saying this is what it would look like in sign language. That would just make no sense to a deaf person. That would be like us trying to force this for us Spanish speakers out there. We know that Spanish is definitely sometimes backward. The question is in front instead of at the end of the sentence. And so that would not make sense. So as a team of 3 interpreters, we watch the play once as an audience member. So if you guys hire some interpreters, these are some things that I would encourage you to do. Get some tickets for the interpreter to just show up and be an audience member. Let them experience what the audience experiences, because when that Phantom of the Opera, when that chandelier just swings out, you're like, oh my gosh, that was so awesome. We want to make sure the interpreters know that that's about to happen, so they can either be ahead of the line, put their hands down, have that moment happen, right? Or they know the lights are going to go out, but they still hear some singing. And so as an interpreters, we try to capture those feelings and emotions. And then the team of interpreter will often get together and say, okay, so I noticed in this part that Dorothy does this, the Tin Man does that. Why don't you do this? We'll split it up. I'll be mostly Dorothy, you be the Tin Man, you be this person. And then maybe the third time they'll go to the theater and they'll stand in the back and they won't look at the stage. They'll stand in the back and they'll do a hands up practice. Um, and so I'm saying all this just to press upon you. There is a lot of preparation. Interpreter providing access to your programs and to your activities is not just a matter, it shouldn't be a last minute thing. It should be in the John Williams and the spotlight and what the stage, even your activity. Maybe it's bingo. It's not just a matter of throwing an interpreter up there. There definitely is a lot of preparation on the interpreter side. Teague, myself, there's about 10,000 certified interpreters, really not that many. There's about 100,000 interpreters out there. Absolutely. There's people out there that want that $25 an hour, but they don't take this profession seriously. Do you want to go into a doctor that went to doctor school, to med school? That's what they call it, right? Okay. I'll say doctor school because I like that. And Teague has to fix my mistakes. No, she can do whatever she wants. So sorry, Teague. I'm so sorry. I keep involving you. I know as an interpreter, you shouldn't involve the interpreter. You want a doctor that has med school, right? Compared to my Aunt Sally, who'll give you an old folks remedy and say, just drink this and it'll be fine, which sometimes it works, but not always, especially if you need a serious surgery. So you want to make sure when you're vetting, you want to make sure that these interpreters, and you might say, I'm going to pause and go, but Keith, where do we find these interpreters? How do we do this? That's a phenomenal question. If you're in South Carolina and you're say it's a theater group and you saw that Tennessee just had a production and they had some interpreters, reach out to other companies that have used interpreters and ask them. A big barrier is often what I hear is often we don't know where to look. We don't know. There's language agencies out there, or there's deaf-owned interpreting agencies out there, and one will vet their interpreters more than another one would. I don't want to say anything bad about any language agency or any interpreting agency, but some would be like McDonald's fast food, and some would be like I want to say Texas Roadhouse. Like that's not really a big of a jump. It's still kind of fast food, but some of those anniversary nights where you and your partner go out and have just a phenomenal steak, or you go to McDonald's and get a burger. Some interpreting agencies are like that. Reach out to them and say, hey, we're doing this production. How can we get the interpreters involved? Get their input maybe in the early planning stages. It's not a, hey, this thing's happening this Tuesday night. It's Friday. We need to call an interpreter. Oftentimes, interpreters, the good interpreters, are booked. We're booked up to 2 to 3 months in advance. So we're not available. And there's a reason why some of the not med doctor school interpreters are available, because just no one uses them. And so, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I'm so all over the place. I'm going to stop and look at my notes. And so ADA interpreters, and if there's any questions, put them in the chat room. Or I know some of the oh, hold on. I just opened up the chat room. Here we go. I was a Denny's employee too in the 90s. Oh, that's awesome. Remember those $2.99 grand slams? Oh my, I still have the baseball cards that we had when Danny's gave out those baseball cards. Let's see here. If there's anyone that needs ASL. If you have any questions, put them in the chat room. Split pea soup. If you have any questions, put them in the chat room. And also, I know there was some discussion, Dory, that you said before we started talking about, what kind of services can we do? What can we provide?
Would
Um,
you like me to you had
sure.
asked me
It's
earlier
me.
if there were things that could help us in our conversation with you, because I know you have just so many great things to offer, and that's what I love about this. But thinking about, Keith, when folks are planning these arts programs, these activities, these exhibitions and events, what are some recommendations or you tips that you have when we're thinking about hiring an ASL interpreter that we need to keep in mind? Because hearing you talk about, you had to do a lot of the signage for your family when you first started out so that they could have the access to participating and joining. What are some things that you recommend or suggest to organizations, businesses, and venues holding arts exhibitions, activities, classes, services that would help them think about? Because in some cases, and this is what I'm trying to get at, that you might be able to explain in such a more personal way with your experiences, it's not just about hiring an ASL interpreter. We have to consider some things when we're picking particular interpreters to participate and provide that service to our event or activity.
Absolutely. So I wrote lots of notes down. So I'm going to jump all around. The last thing you said there made me think of interpreting at Madison Square Gardens. Um, I enjoyed interpreting for a lot of the band in the 80s. Brian Adams, Everything I Do, and it just made me cry. Interpreting for Police. I loved Police, Roxanne, and all those Every Breath You Take. And so I remember it was my wife. My wife is also a certified interpreter of 30 plus years. And so whenever we can work together, it's like, oh, what a great experience. But we prepared so much, like, what does this lyric mean? What does the do run run, the do run run? What does that mean? What does, and so I don't want to say we overanalyzed it, but we just analyzed it to death. And then when we interpreted that night. And so I just want you to know the interpreters. So these interpreters, we do work hard behind the scenes. So oftentimes when you hear what our price is, when you hear what our quote is, when you hear what our rate is, it's not just flapping hands for that 1 hour event. It includes all this prep time that we are doing. And so we get there and we interpret, and the deaf audience is like, oh my gosh, that was a great interpretation. Thank you so much. Yes, this was awesome. And then Madison Square Garden reached out again and said, hey, Bon Jovi's coming to town. Would you guys do the same thing? Like, all right, Bon Jovi. Okay, what does this song mean? Wanted, Dead or Alive, or Living on a Prayer? Whoa, oh my gosh, I'm not going to decide living on a prayer. That's so silly. What does it really mean? And we get there, and we practice and practice. Then we get there and we start doing our interpretations. And the deaf person is like, excuse me, can you guys mind just signing it like in English order? Because I'm kind of hard of hearing and I want to hear when they're exactly saying living on a prayer, because I want to jump in and go, whoa, whoa. And I was like, you're right. So oftentimes when we're hiring an interpreter, we need to have the deaf person's feedback, maybe the community's feedback. Maybe we reach out to organizations that have deaf communities saying, hey, we're going to provide ASL services, we're going to provide interpreting services. If it's an individual, you know, sometimes when I get to the assignment, I have to quickly go, how do you want ASL? And we say strong ASL, or do you want it in English order? What do you want it? Because maybe it's a late deaf and adult, and they do want things that we don't do in American Sign Language. We might add signs like it, is, am, are, the, and those are just things that come from a language called Signing Exact English that were used in the mainstream educational program just to teach kids what English looked like. Unfortunately, some people think that was a language. It's not. And that's one thing I love about my mom, because the deaf community, majority of the deaf community is against that, that it, am, are, is, the. But my mom gave me the book. She says, I want you to learn this signing exact English, because if you ever meet a deaf person that uses it, I want them to have access. She knew what it was like not to have access. So even though she didn't use it, she said, I want you to learn it because I know you're becoming an interpreter. I want you to learn it. So if you ever do meet that person, and it's happened several times, I've met a person saying, hey, I want it in English order. I want that English stuff. Absolutely. So involve the deaf community, involve the deaf organizations saying, hey, we would love to provide interpreters. Is there a specific a kind of interpreter that you want? And if you're not educated in that, if you don't know what to ask, it might be hard to ask, but just say, what kind of interpreters would you like, and let them just come back and say, okay, I prefer English, I prefer this, I prefer ASL. It really is about, and it might be hard to reach out to the deaf person. Like even today, we waited till the meeting started, then we said, hey, if there's anybody out there, and if you let us know if this is what you need. On the other side, and for example, I go to church and I interpret at church, and we've had some interpreters say, if you don't see any deaf person, you don't have to interpret. And I say, you don't know about that one deaf person that maybe is not a church member, is maybe they're not on their walk of faith yet, right? And they just want to come into the church. They just want to sit in the last row and they just want to see what's going on. They don't want to identify themselves. So sometimes when we ask the deaf community to do that, it's great. They'll say, oh yeah, I'm here. Okay, oh great. Wait, we have the interpreter over here. And it's okay if this happens. Just understand sometimes you might have deaf people that don't identify themselves. Why? The hearing people aren't identifying themselves. The Spanish, why do I have to do that extra work? But if they do identify themselves, or if you do know who the person is, then great. Reach out to them. And I know for like organizations, nonprofits, I worked for a nonprofit versus a business. A business is going to make money. So they see no, like, hey, Keith, we're going to hire you. How much? $200. Okay, we know that the deaf person is going to the Bon Jovi concert. Tickets are $70. There's 5 of them. We're still going to make a profit. So sure. Nonprofit organizations oftentimes, and this is sad, say, oh, we don't have the money for interpreters. Oh, can we find volunteers? And us interpreters will go back at you and say, okay, so when you were looking for presenters, did you go, oh, we can't afford, is there any volunteers? And there's not. We pay for all these other things. And usually the interpreter, we ask them to be volunteers, or we ask them to come in really cheap. So I would encourage nonprofit organizations every year, or when we're looking for grants, that needs to be in the original budget. That needs to be like, hey, freelance interpreters, and I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, among the Amish people here, and interpreters here are making $60 an hour. That's a direct contract. And so we need to know, how much do they charge in South Carolina? What is the average price? And you can get that information, nationwide. But let's get that in the budget already. So it's just not that awkward moment of like, oh, we have deaf people. And so you're telling my mom and dad, you're not worth it. You don't know what we forgot to plan. We forgot to include you. We're doing this great thing. And that is something, especially in 2025, the ADA has been around for more than 30 years. It's like we are providing services means like you provide a spotlight so we can see the presenter. Would you say, oh, presenter, I'm sorry, we're going to turn all the lights off because we forgot to buy some lights? So I would just encourage nonprofit organizations to look for those grants, to look for that money, to put it in your budget. Most businesses understand it. That's why even for a doctor, I'm just going to go off on an ADA thing here. Even for a doctor's office, they can't say we can't afford to provide an interpreter because they say we're only charging the patient $60. The interpreter's charging us a 2-hour minimum, $300. The law, ADA, the law is going to look at how much did you earn in that year. They don't look at that one assignment. So you lost a little money that one assignment, but look at you gained this much in a year. That's just for us businesses out there. So that's what the ADA looks at. So how can we, reach out to, even I know in South Carolina has an RID. They have a state chapter of the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. And reach out to the SCRID. I know I used to know some people involved, Jason Herdich, Shona McGee. I don't know if they're still there now, but you can reach out to those organizations and say, hey, we just realized we need to involve interpreters. We need to, what's the going rate? Can you help us get some resources? What are the agencies that we should be reaching out to? Um, let's see. So I think that answered most of that last question.
You did a great job. I had another one for you. And Mary put, just so you know, Keith, we did a whole webinar on that, planning that in your budget and the things you need to keep into account. So thank you for reinforcing that because we do know it's important. So I wanted to think about, Keith, how do you determine what jobs you take and what jobs you don't in consideration of the deaf and hearing disability culture, hard of hearing culture? Are there certain things that you would stay away from versus others?
That's a great question, and at the same time, I'm reading a question in the audience.
Oh,
But
thank you.
so, as an interpreter, as a human, we all have triggers. We all have triggers. One of the worst experiences I ever had interpreting for my mom was in the 1970s. I remember vividly walking down the street with my mom, and we were just having a great conversation in sign language. In one hand, I had a 7-Up bottle. And I say that because we got to the store, 7-Eleven. I walked in, I gave them the bottle. They gave me 10 cents, right? Remember when we used to do that? Go take the bottle and get 10 cents. Walked over to the payphone. The payphone was still one of the ones that do we call it rotary or whatever? The number still kind of went around. The reason why we were going to the phone is my mom got a Western Union telegram. That company officially closed, I think, like 6 years ago. The sign that we use for telegram is this. And now when I do it to the younger kids, and I'm tapping my crooked index finger on my right hand into my open palm on my left hand, to show an old sign for telegram. And that company's not ever around. But when you got a telegram from the Western Union, you would go to the phone and you would call in to retrieve your message. And so that's why I got the 10 cents. I dialed, and my mom was there and I was ready to interpret. And my mom and dad never forced me to interpret. And that is not, all of us CODAs have different experiences. Some were forced and they are mad or angry about it. Some were, some loved it. Being in such a big community, I wasn't forced. So whenever I had the opportunity, I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. Except for this day. So I dial the number and I give them the Western Union code, and the operator starts talking, like just like, hey, heads up, this is gonna be sad. They just said, your mom has died. It would be my grandma, but would be her mom, right? And being a CODA, not knowing that an interpreter would stop, pause, filter, maybe even kind of go, oh, I just signed your mom died. Like just straight, no emotions on my face. I'm telling my mom what I heard. Your mom died. And she just started crying to start like what? Like what? Just that's how she's processing the news. That's how she's finding out about it. The telegram reader, Western Union, instead of saying end of sentence or period, they would use the word stop to signify they're going to say that's the end of that sentence. And now here's the next sentence. So the person said stop. I looked at my mom and I did this generic sign for stop, which was pitting one hand into another, just like stop. My mom saw her little 8-year-old son saying stop, and she just started crying even louder, going, you're embarrassed of me? You're embarrassed that a deaf woman is crying. She thought I was telling her to stop crying. She thought I was worried about everyone's going to look at her deaf voice, at her wailing. And I just remember just looking at her and just going, I don't know what happened. How did my hands make my mom cry? My hands have always been for communication, or my hands have always been for sharing information. And so was it that day that I remember? No. Years later, I became an interpreter and I was asked to interpret a funeral. And I walked into the room. I had to turn around and leave. I could not do it because it brought back those old memories. So and I say, I said earlier, we all have trigger points. So as a human, so just know that sometimes an interpreter, they need the information. They need the information. So you need to let them know, hey, this, or that. I another time was asked to go interpret and they said, oh, it's just like an AA group. It's just like an NA group. And those are terms for Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. And those are people, fighting addiction. And we would go there and we know that they talk about 12 steps. We know that they, talk about their problems. And so, okay, no problem. I was told that this thing was just like it. I was like, okay, sure, I'm familiar. I've done this before. I go in and it was a group of pedophiles talking about being a father. Like I think I just had our children. I couldn't do it. I was like, and I had to walk out. I had to walk out again. I called the agency and said, that's not just like an AA. That is something the interpreter needs to know. I mean, that's a hard subject for anybody, let alone the interpreter. And so the more we can prepare the interpreter, the more that we can tell the interpreter, hey, this is what's going to be involved. Because maybe even the play, like maybe we're talking about domestic violence. Some of us nonprofit organizations will do. We want to provide access to the deaf community and domestic violence, and we just that might be a trigger point for some of us interpreters. So it's just important that we know that too. Let me look here at the question. Sometimes I hear from organizations that they say, well, we're not going to provide interpreters because no deaf people are showing up, right? That's the cart and the horse. If you don't provide interpreters, deaf people will never show up. My deaf parents showed up to Jaws and Star Wars and me playing the bass violin. They showed up with no access. So you don't know that they're there because why does a deaf person have to always say, I'm deaf, I'm deaf? The venue should just provide interpreters. And it's kind of like at church, the church, and I'm going to bring up church again. So talking in here in the local community, they're like, oh, I'd like to go to church, but there's no interpreter there. Oh, this church provides it. Oh, I didn't know that. If you just provide the services, regardless, put it in your budget, regardless, the word's going to get out in the deaf community. Hey, that Harrisburg Theater, they provide interpreters. Um, it might just be, and this is another 88 thing. You might have a run of 7 weeks, so you might have your event happen several nights. And you might say, well, we can't provide interpreters every single night. That you only have to provide interpreters for one event, one of those nights. As long as one night is accessible, you are in compliance of the law. And so make sure that you provide services and then advertise like heck. Reach out to the South SCRID, reach out to the South Carolina NAD, National Association of the Deaf. I know in South Carolina there's a lot of deaf associations, deaf organizations. Reach out to them. They will help you market. They will help you bring the deaf community there because you're just going to advertise in a local paper or a local when you go to those truck stops and they have all those New Jersey state events going on, no one looks at those. But have the deaf community help you advertise, and then word gets out there. And we got some websites here. Word gets out there, and then the deaf community will start showing up. Oh, I know we're getting close to the end of the time. I guess I'll start do some Q&A, which we're kind of doing now anyway. But
Thank you, Keith. What great information, learning so much. We want to open it up to all of you now that are in our audience. If you would either like to put your questions in the chat or unmute yourselves, we are happy to have you participate. We'd love to hear the questions from you. We want to be able to provide you the best information from Keith. And if you need anything else that might be local, Mary and myself and Amanda are happy to help out.
access is awesome. It's cool. All the cool kids are doing it. Come on now. One time I went to an Oakland Raiders game. I wrote that. While somebody's thinking of the questions. My dad took me to an Oakland Raiders game. Everything happened in the 70s. I had a great 70s experience. I had long hair too. My dad took me to a Raiders game and we were playing against the Denver Broncos, the Orange Crush. Oh, we hated them so much. We get there and my dad and his deaf friend, yay. A couple seats over were some Denver fans. And the people around, and whenever Denver scored a touchdown, these two guys, yay. The other, and I don't know if you've ever seen TV shows where they show Raider fans. We're all dressed up in black and silver. We got spikes. We got Darth Vader outfits on. We're a hard looking group. All the Raider fans would throw cuss words towards these Denver fans. And I just remember being like 6 years old going, Daddy, Daddy, he said, and I'm trying to finger spell it out. And my dad's like, don't worry about it. You don't need to interpret everything. Just interpret what's important, right? And so that's what I want to emphasize to these organizations, to these agencies here. What you're providing is important. That's the kind of stuff that we want the deaf community to have access to the theater, to the arts, to classes, even if it's a cooking class. Just provide access. One, it's the right thing to do, and just imagine your parents not being invited to these things, not being able to go, because maybe there's no ramp for a wheelchair, there's no this, there's so many barriers out there, and we're at the age and the year and the time where we have the resources. Now it's a matter of us using those resources and providing the services. And I'm not a Raiders fan anymore. Once they moved to Las Vegas, I divorced them. I don't do sports anymore. Go Panthers. Oh, do we root for the Panthers in South Carolina? Okay. No, no, that's
I
North
think it
Carolina.
depends on who your team is. I get a lot of different messaging from people on that. I just wanted to let everyone know that in the chat, we put the RID in South Carolina that Keith mentioned. We also put our local statewide South Carolina Deaf organization. And then we put a link on our page for additional organizations that serve the deaf and hard of hearing communities across South Carolina, so that if you all are looking to have some of these resources to understand the needs of the deaf and hard of hearing communities, that you have as many resources at your disposal. You can also contact Amanda and those of us at Able SC, and we will get you connected to what you need. At the end of the day, we want everybody to be able to participate in the wonderful programs, services, classes, and opportunities you all offer. And so, whatever way we can help make that happen, just let us know. I want you to know you got a shout out. Keith and I read things in the chat to folks as an accessibility feature for those who may have visual disabilities or could be on their screen on their phone and you can't see the chat. But Ria wanted you to know, wow, my favorite webinar in quite some time. I get why you do comedy. I keep smiling at your stories. Bless you. I'm on to the next webinar. UFFDA, thank you. So wanted you to know that. Woohoo! Those who know me, I'm a woohooer because I love the energy you're bringing to this webinar and all of the people participating in the energy that you're bringing. Amanda, did you have anything you wanted to add as we're closing the webinar for
Yeah,
today?
thanks, Dory. I just want to say thank you, Keith. Hearing your story was really lovely, and I just appreciate everything you talked about with access and just thinking about the arts are we want to make the arts for everyone, and the only way we can do that is with the help of everyone in providing this type of access. So, thank you, Keith. Do you have any closing thoughts for organizations who may be hearing this information, maybe for the first time or maybe in a new light? Just a little nugget for them to maybe take on into their next season of planning, or kind of maybe words of wisdom as maybe they're starting off and thinking about maybe using an ASL interpreter for the first time in an upcoming art experience.
I'm going to do something visual. I mean, I'm not trying to not include anybody, but this morning my mom texted me this, and I'm holding up a picture of my mom when she was 6 years old, and she is being held by a person there, and the captions below that is, Keith, this is when I went to go to the deaf school. I did not know sign language until I was 6 years old. I lived in a family that had, my mom and my dad her mom and dad. No one signed in her house. No one. So can you imagine? Can you imagine growing up as a child, growing up and just not having access? Go back to us with children, all those interactions when our kids are 2 or 3. I love you, and I still tease my daughter and how she mispronounced some of those words. And so, can you imagine? We have members in our deaf community that in the beginning of their lives that had no access. Maybe they, for whatever reason. And so just we're in a time now, we just need to provide access. We just need to do that. We need to think of all those little girls, all those deaf people, all those people with disabilities, all those people out there that just want to have access. There's just no reason. A lot of the programs, a lot of the things that you guys are doing, everybody deserves access to it. So I just thank you all for showing up here today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Keith. Thanks everyone for joining, and please consider joining our webinar, our next one in January.
Awesome. Amanda, can I ask you a quick question, my friend? Everyone
Sure.
else can log off. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Keith,
Thank you,
before you
Keith.
hop out,
Yes.
Mary, so nice to meet you. I'm so glad today worked out. Thank you to my team for helping out, and this was fantastic. Do you have anything new? Anything up and coming? Are you working on a new show right now? I meant to ask you that.
I'm driving to Pensacola tomorrow. I'll be in Florida. I'll be driving through the Carolinas, going to doing a show in Pensacola this Friday. You want to come on out? Come on out. KeithWann.com.
We'll
Okay,
wave
I'm gonna
at
make
you
sure
as you go by. How about that?
Yes.
Woohoo!
Yes, we'll wave.